Welcome back, friends.
Welcome back.
It's time for another episode. Another episode of the Strange and Beautiful Book Club, where we talk about Dune like a lot.
Deep cut.
Deep cut. So you want to go ahead and do it? Because I got my finger on the button.
Let's do it.
Okay.
The right button.
The correct button. Yes.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to the Strange and Beautiful Book Club.
Deep cuts. Dune edition.
Oh, I'm out of
Honey,
practice.
You usually say deep cut.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let's do this again. Let's do this again. Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the straight. Oh, God damn it. We have too many podcasts. Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to the Strange and Beautiful Book Club. Deep cut.
Dune edition.
We got it. Three tries and we got it. All right. I was looking up the cast on IMDb so I don't forget everybody's names, because we are talking about the SciFi miniseries of Dune.
Frank Herbert's Dune.
Frank Herbert's Dune. And I think it was released. Of course, now I'm on the cast list. 2000. 23 years ago.
You don't have to hurt me like that.
And I know. I saw one that's like, how is it that kids born in the year 2000 are 23? And I was born in 1985 and I'm 23. I don't understand. I feel that so deeply. But I watched this when it came out, like appointment watched this. I remember waiting. It's 3 episodes long. Each episode is movie length. Like an hour and 40 minutes. I think it was 2 hours in total with commercials. So this is 6 hours of Dune content.
Oh, yeah.
And I really think it's one of my favorite adaptations.
I'm pretty sure this is why my standard hairstyle has been brushed forward, front flipped up.
You are. Who had that hairstyle? Who were you
that's
emulating?
That's kind of how Paul has his hair after he joins the Friends.
Yeah, after he does the glow up.
Yeah, his aging / maturing
look
makeup change.
Wow. I mean, thank you, I guess, for your standard hairstyle for the last 23 years. When it's not too long to do that and it just stands up on its own, which is what it's doing right now. But this stars William Hurt as Duke Leto Atreides. And I guess he was a Dune fan and regretted that he wasn't in the 80s Dune until...
Oh, really?
Well, until the 80s Dune sucked so bad. And then he was like, oh, dodged that bullet. Now I get a chance to be in another one instead.
Do it right this time.
I thought he was a really good Leto Atreides.
Ditto.
I see Leto as a very steady, all conflict is internal kind of guy. Mm-hmm. Like, I literally am always aware that I'm being watched and I have to present a well put together front at all times.
Right.
And I thought William Hurt was a good choice for that.
And I liked his delivery of the line, "They tried to take the life of my son."
Yeah.
Better than Jurgen.
Because there's a contrast.
Right. There's a contrast in his emotional performance.
Right.
Because every other time he's having a conversation about, bad thing just happened, I need to stay calm.
Right.
But then in this other scene, he's just with his trusted lieutenants and he can be emotive.
Right. Exactly.
And so, and we get a lot more of William Hurt in Paul's visions.
Yes, we do. We get him in like a variety of ways. We get clips from what will be future events, but we also get like metaphorical things, seeing
Yes.
his dad's face melt
Symbology.
away. Symbolism. Yes. I think the word you're looking for there is symbolism. Yeah, and I thought that Alec Newman was a really good choice as well. He didn't go on to do a ton of
This
stuff.
is who I think of in my head when I'm reading the books.
Yeah, he does petulant and obnoxious and moody really well.
Oh, yes.
So,
Absolutely.
So well. And he didn't go on. I mean, he's gone on to be like, oh, that guy. Yeah, he's been in like one episode of a bunch of television shows. He does a lot of voice acting, but this wasn't like a springboard for his career.
Right.
I don't know. The 2000s is really an era of miniseries. We have a miniseries explosion around the year 2000, and this was one of Syfy's first miniseries attempts. And I think it's really successful. I have always enjoyed this adaptation.
Yeah.
I have not rewatched this adaptation in a really long time.
Yeah.
And I did not realize how dated the CG would be.
When we were watching this, I was like, oh, when exactly was this? Oh, this was the year after episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And everybody was just doing as much CG as you could throw into the movie.
Yeah.
And at the time, it looked good for CG of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's okay. I have seen, maybe it's not on Netflix anymore, but there was a TV show on Netflix that just came out. And I think it was like First Bite or First Kill. I don't know. The CG was no better is what I'm getting at. I was like, I almost felt nostalgic watching the CG because I was like, oh, that looks like early 2000s.
It looks like a Final Fantasy VII cutscene.
I said, that looks like early 2000s, like made for TV movie, sci-fi made for TV movie CG.
It reminded me of Babylon 5 CG.
It did. Yeah, it was very much like that. But they use it sparingly in their defense. They do a lot of, we clearly have maybe 20 feet by 15 feet of sand, and then we have a giant matte
There's a
painting.
lot of matte paintings, and I prefer a well-done matte painting to poorly done CG.
Of course you like matte paintings. Oh, I've never heard that joke before. Yes, I think it does it create the same sense of realness that maybe filming on location would have? No. But is it still fine?
For a made-for-TV miniseries, it's the less bad option.
This isn't the era of we throw tons of fucking money at television.
Right.
This isn't I bought the rights to like 2 paragraphs in the annex of this one Tolkien novel for $1 billion. I'm going to somehow extrapolate it out into a television show. This is like, here you go. You have a pack of cigarettes, you have a pound of cocaine, and you have $10,000. I need a miniseries by the end of the week. Don't sell the cocaine. That's for the actors.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good summary of the vibe for TV production.
Yeah, in the 2000s. Yeah, television was not serious. Television was not serious in the way it's serious now.
Even in the year 2000, most people still had CRT TVs.
Yeah.
Almost nobody had high definition TV. I think the 1080 spec was defined, but it wasn't something that was like advertised on consumer TVs, because a lot of times your TV, like cable quality, you didn't get 1080p on your cable
box. So who gave a
box.
shit? Why would you do that?
Right. So you're not going to throw the matte painting on the extra blurry, the blurring effect of the analog TV is going to look great.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it helps us to underscore the fact that the most important thing in Dune is the characters.
Yes.
And when you create a matte painting, you get the feeling of where you are, but you also get a feeling of intimacy because you
Right,
don't.
and it lets the characters get the feeling of where they are,
Right.
without green screens and stuff.
Well, yeah, but also you as a viewer are not lost in the expanse of
Right.
of being in the desert.
It's like you were saying one of your criticisms of The Hobbit
yes,
in theaters was that everything was crisp, high definition, and in focus.
well, we saw it in the high frame rate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so part of what the filmography does is guide your eye to what is meaningful and significant for the viewer in this scene.
Yeah.
But when everything has the same crispness and focus, you can be lost.
right.
And so having a matte painting behind the actors really highlights the actors as the meaningful thing for the viewer to focus on.
Yeah. Yes. And we get some more of our actors just before we whoosh off a little bit too far. We have Saskia Reeves as the Lady Jessica, and she's been in some other stuff. She's another one of those like, oh, I've seen her in other
I
things.
recognize her from other things.
She's really the only other one that I I recognize P.H. Moriarty, the guy who plays Gurney Halleck.
Giancarlo.
Well, Giancarlo, we're not there yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're introducing the cast in order of appearance.
I guess, but this is Gurney Halleck, and he's the one that he plays in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Yes.
He usually plays the like crazy dude, the crazy British dude, but he's like a serious character in this. He does a good job. I think he's a good Gurney. And then we get Ian McNeice as the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen.
I do really like him as the Baron.
He does a good job. And kudos to the sci-fi executives in the 2000s. Maybe it was the pound of cocaine, but they were like, hey, can we let him be gay? And they were like, yeah.
Can we let him be... Well, I guess he doesn't really go into the pedophile angle.
No, that's a step too far,
But
and I'm fine with that.
Right.
But they're like, can we maybe include the fact that he really enjoys the company of men? That cool with you guys? And they're like, sure, do some cocaine about it.
He's
Not
the
a problem.
bad guy.
Well, that's a whole other thing. But yes,
Oh yeah.
yeah, othered as a way of pointing out that he's the villain.
Right.
But he sells it. There's that
He
scene
really does.
where he gets the glass. He gets a wine glass from a servant, and they make eyes at each other. And it's a really heated exchange in like 15 seconds of this guy giving him a wine glass. And then the scene where he sees Fade fighting in the ring.
Oh yeah, and the common refrain from the book, such a beautiful boy.
Such a beautiful boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Giancarlo Giannini.
Yeah.
Giannini. Giancarlo Giannini. I'm just going to
Like
go with that.
Panini, Giannini.
Giannini, the Emperor Shaddam IV. That's what
And
that
the
is.
shimmery rainbow
Yes,
outfit.
the costumes. Let's pause a moment and address the costumes because they are my favorite part.
I can't say
series.
I love the Emperor's outfit.
You don't like his
but
iridescent dress?
It is, it stands out
Yes.
and it doesn't look like bad. It's just, I'm not sure what my issue with it is.
A lot of the other costumes.
I think it's the fit.
Maybe it's the fit. I think it's because a lot of the other costumes feel like an outgrowth of something we have now. Like the Spacing Guild almost look like maybe nun or monk habits.
Yes.
Where they have the hat and the...
Absolutely.
And then the Bene Gesserit have again, like an almost...
There's a lot of ornamental aspects
like,
to the costumes.
Yes, and the hats.
But then the Emperor's...
But the Emperor is literally wearing like an Amish style dress, but iridescent and skin tight.
Yes, I think it's the skin tight part where everybody else wears their costumes are ornamental and very like flattering
Yeah.
to their figures. Maybe if we had like modern like cast, I don't know, prep where you spend like the 6 months before you start
Getting
filming.
buff or something.
Yeah, like bulking up a little bit.
The guy who plays Fade did.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
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 But no offense, Giancarlo. It's not that flattering on you.
It's a weird, I get where you're going. It's not the most successful of our costumes.
Yes, but in
sure.
general, amazing costumes.
We have complained about their still suits in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that the still suits in this series are based on the cooling suits that they wear in NASCAR.
Oh.
Yes. So the suits that they wear in NASCAR have like they circulate cool water throughout the suit to keep them cool because of course they don't have anything but an engine and like a roll cage. They don't have air conditioning. And they're traveling really, really fast, so heat is an issue. It keeps the rider cool. That's what they based it off of. And I have to say they looked better than I remembered.
Yeah, they probably looked worse on lower resolution screens.
Maybe.
Because there are some details that I was like, oh, okay, like where the straw comes out.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of tubes that radiate out from there to different parts of the suit. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense, like connecting all the catch pockets to the tube that you drink from. I don't remember seeing those before, but I may have been watching on a much smaller screen from farther away at lower resolution. So,
yeah. We also get Julie Cox as the Princess Irulan. And I like Irulan's expanded role.
yes, I like throwing her in there. I was telling Rachel when we were watching it that I really liked knowing that what Paul and Chani's relationship is going to be, where because he's been having these dreams and visions about Chani like for years, and then when he finally the sleeper awakens, that really gets expanded in his mind. He knows that Chani is the one.
Yeah.
He knows what their future is going to be like, right? And he is completely in love with her. And so at the end of the book, when you throw in Princess Irulan, it's kind of like, she's just kind of this.
It feels like a political maneuvering. It just feels very...
Yeah, it's a very shallow character interaction. And so I appreciate that in the SciFi series, they throw Princess Irulan in from the beginning, and her and Paul, have some chemistry, and they kind of like each other.
Yeah.
And that adds more depth to the relationship that Paul and Chani are going to have.
Right.
Because it's not just, oh, here's my fated mate.
Yeah.
It's,
I hear you.
Let's see, I heard someone say this on a video on some platform the other day. That if there, I think it was a snip from The Good Place.
Okay.
And the guy was saying, if there is such a thing as soulmates, they are created, they don't already exist.
Gotcha.
It's an emergent property of two people having such a deep interaction.
I gotcha.
And so that's what I was reminded of, just kind of stewing on what are the impacts for Paul and Chani's relationship if Paul and Irulan kind of have some stuff going on.
Yeah.
And it's that it's not that they were fated to be together. It's that they are the right people for each other, and their destiny isn't so much that they end up together, it's that they grow
Together.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think introducing her earlier fulfills the role that her little snippets at the beginning of each chapter do,
Right.
where it gives us insight into her character that we otherwise would not have gotten. Because,
Right.
like, if you think in the 80s Dune, we see her at the very beginning in the extended edition. In the
Right.
non-extended
The
edition,
info
you don't.
dump at the beginning.
Yeah. And then you see her at the very end, and that is it. So peppering her in really kind of deepens the choice at the very, very end, where Paul is like, yeah, sure, we can get together, but you can have the title of wife. Or you can have the title of, like, my wife, but you'll never be my wife. You'll
Right.
never be the one I love. I do like the guy who plays James Watson. I'm sorry, guy who plays Duncan Idaho. His name is James Watson. Sorry, I looked at it to make sure I remember what it was, but his name is James Watson, and he plays Duncan Idaho, and he is apparently from the planet of Scotland, where you get to have a Scottish accent.
Rachel was telling me that the guy that plays Paul is Scottish.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. He does a really good, just like neutral American accent.
Yeah.
And then we hear Duncan talk, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they're from the same village.
I don't know. James Watson's
I was just
from
thinking
Glasgow.
because his accent is so recognizable.
They're both from Glasgow.
Okay, maybe they knew each other. But
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Don't everybody in Scotland know each other?
well, if you're actors in the same city,
I guess they're. And Paul is 4 years younger
yeah,
or older.
and they're similar age,
Yeah, they're similar.
similar
age.
age actors in the same city. That's where I was going with. Maybe they knew each other.
Yeah.
The initial line was, "Oh, they're all Scottish,"
Yeah.
but then you said they're both from Glasgow. Okay.
Yeah. Alec Newman is 26 in this. He's not playing 15. He's supposed to be a little bit older.
Right.
They deliberately made him older so that they'd have a bigger pool of actors to choose
Yeah,
from.
and they really
And thank God, because if I have to watch a 15-year-old boy do all like save his mother and then 2 years later save the world,
right. That's a little bit
that's a stretch.
unrealistic
Yeah.
in the book. But then he's supposed to be like extra mature because of all his like
If Kate was here,
mental potential and
if Kate was
blah,
here,
blah,
she would
blah,
point
blah.
out that in that world, 15 is older.
except it's the future.
No, I know, but it's more feudal. I mean, it's basically feudalism in space.
It literally is.
It literally is
feudalism.
feudalism in
Yeah.
space, and he is burdened with terrible purpose. So, it ages you, okay?
The unbearable weight of massive destiny.
Massive. What does he call his like terrible purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah, his massive weight of terrible purpose. Yeah, I think that he plays him. I do like that. Really, the only way we're going to age him up is we go from brushing his hair over into on his forehead to swooping his hair up. But it works.
And the makeup.
And
they
his
really have him.
and his demeanor.
Yeah.
And his demeanor.
Yes, it's mostly his demeanor. And they have like a ton of foundation and stuff on him. Like when we see him in the ship
yeah.
when they're on the way to Arrakis.
Another thing you would not have seen on a CRT TV.
Right. But it's, I think, to make him look younger and more pale. So that
A
when.
lighter shade of pale.
I mean, he's Scottish. You don't have to try hard.
Shh. We probably have Scottish listeners. We love you. And
I'm a ginger.
yes, I can say that because I'm a ginger.
I wasn't going to say that.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say if I don't get outside like a couple times a week, I'm like super white.
Oh, he's only 5'8".
Alec Newman is?
Yeah. I was thinking he looks
Interesting.
really short when he's around all the other dudes, especially William Hurt.
Yeah.
It's a very father-son height difference.
But the makeup and the hairstyle accentuates the affect that he
Yeah.
projects of the just young, spoiled, royalty.
Yeah. I think he does a better job of conveying I have grown up, like I start as a child
Right.
and then I grow up than Kyle MacLachlan does.
Yes. Yeah, because in Kyle MacLachlan's case, he's pretty much already competent and like hyper rational, and
Yeah.
he can do all the statecraft stuff.
Yeah.
And so like in the scene with the big dinner party,
Which we include.
This
is like the only adaptation that includes the dinner party. I don't know.
Does the new one not?
Only seen it once.
Oh, okay. I think the new one does.
Okay.
And it's like similar. It's
verbal chess.
If I'm recalling correctly, which I may be, I make things up in my head a lot. So.
That's fine. Let's wait and confirm that when we watch that.
I'm
let's
80% confident.
Let's confine the discussion to the episode we just watched, which is part 1.
So they have the dinner party, but it's not close to the book.
No, it's not. We have the dinner party at all, which is great. But Paul like storms off
just to like reinforce this unmature character.
Yeah.
He gets upset at something somebody says.
Smart but not mature.
Off. Right.
Yeah. And it also gives us a chance for Irulan and him to have like a private moment. And I do like this part where they're complaining to each other and he's like, "Are you trying to intimidate me?" And she's like, "No, I'm trying to interest you."
Right. The stereotypical teenage boy totally misunderstanding the girl flirting with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, "No, I'm telling you, I dig you. Like we could make this happen.
You're a lot more interesting than I thought."
Yeah, exactly. And then what do we think about the eyes in this version?
The glowing eyes.
The glowing blue eyes. Yes.
It is much more pronounced.
Yes.
I like it better.
Yes. It lends to some pretty cool effects later when they're all in the darkness. Yes. And then they you can just see their eyes.
Right. Every once in a while, I think it's a little bit too much, but it's well done.
Yeah. I like this slight twist because it creates an even more otherworldly feel to it.
It makes it feel more mystical.
Yeah. One of the other things I've always loved about this is they hired local actors. So these are almost all Czech actors outside the main group.
Yeah, especially the Fremen. Like all the Fremen are local, like
I'm not sure Stilgar is, but most of them people. Are. And it just gives us this sense of like exoticness, this otherworldliness, because they have this accent and it's not a familiar accent. It's not an accent we hear very often. And it just gives so much flavor to
and a lot of them didn't
happening.
Speak English. So like when you're
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay. That's what I'd read about it. And I'd thought it was on the 1984 one, but I'd read an article a while back about when they were filming it, they hired local people.
Yeah. Maybe we need to get that book DVD combo about the making of Frank Herbert's Dune.
The secrets of
Frank Herbert's Dune. Yeah.
But the article I was reading was talking about spaghetti westerns where they were in Italy. And so you have all these westerns that have like English dialogue, but all the extras are local people who don't speak English.
Yeah.
Local actors. And so...
Well, they're not really extras. I mean, some of them are extras, but a lot of them are just like, they're characters.
Right.
But they're played by local actors.
Yes.
Yeah, like Liette and some of the other ones.
This article I was reading was talking about the spaghetti westerns and Dune were two of the things they were talking about. And one of the aspects that they were highlighting was having like non-proficient English speakers speaking English lines, lending a sense of, they said in the spaghetti westerns, it just kind of comes off as bad acting.
Yeah.
But in Dune, it kind of works because they're supposed to be, other.
Yeah. They're supposed to be foreign.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it works really well in Dune because it kind of accentuates the foreignness.
I don't know how I feel about the green cloaks. That's maybe my only one
In the desert?
kibble. Yeah, quibble.
Yeah.
Quibble. Yeah, I don't know that we needed to look like we were going to Hobbiton when we need to blend into dunes and there's no green. And I thought the worm was cool.
Maybe they're elven.
I thought the worm was cool. I mean, it's a bad CG worm, but I thought the worm was cool. The like sound it makes.
Yes.
Yeah, it reminded me of the new Dune sound, where it's like the gargling sound almost.
Mm-hmm.
So this is broken up into 3 parts, and it's the same 3 parts as the novel.
Right.
And they are even named the same. So part 1 is... Yeah, I'm waiting for you to fill this in.
Oh, I thought you had notes or something.
No. Where?
I think it's just Dune.
I know part 2 is Muad'Dib, and part 3 is the Prophet. But I always forget the name of the part 1. But it's really just from them getting onto Caladan.
Yes.
Or
Dune,
going from
Muad'Dib,
Caladan to
the
Dune.
Prophet.
Yeah. So it's really just them going from Caladan to Dune, settling into Dune, being betrayed, and then they get abandoned in the desert.
Flying away into the sandstorm.
Yeah. They get abandoned in the desert. They get taken to a secondary location by Duncan, Idaho, which it turns out is just a small siege instead of being a
the environmental
station. Yeah. And then they end up fleeing in the Thopter. Right.
Which the plot cutoff point is slightly different, but
it's
I
fine.
I think them flying off into the sandstorm is a better cliffhanger episode cutoff.
This is probably
for the TV
why I thought that's
adaptation.
where part 1 ended when we talked about the book. Because I
Yeah.
was like, oh, no, it ends when they fly in the storm. And you're like, I literally just looked it up and that is not where it ends.
I have it bookmarked.
I have it right here. I was like, no, that's where the miniseries ends. So, in my defense, I watched this a lot. I had it on DVD. I watched it when it first came out. I thought Paul Newman, or no, God,
I know
Paul
one of the
Alex
first
Newman
things you shared with me when we met was the soundtrack.
You're welcome. It's a good soundtrack. The Children of Dune soundtrack is better because it's written by a little guy named Brian Herbert. Oh, not Frank Herbert. No, who writes it?
I was like, what? No, that's not who wrote it.
It's late. This
I'm
is
gonna
why we
let
don't
you look
record
it up.
this late. Children of Dune. Brian Tyler. Okay. Yeah.
Not a little guy in the soundtrack world.
No, not Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son, who has continued the series, but Brian Theodore Tyler, the American composer, who also did Super Mario Brothers, the movie, the 2023 one, not the one with John Leguizamo.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's not a feather in anybody's cap, but not that one, the other one. Also a bunch of the Fast and Furious.
Oh yeah, he's
Scream.
He's got a lot of movies under his belt.
I mean, but this one's good too. Yeah, I always liked the sound, the music in this. I felt like it was it doesn't sound like synthesizer music or like a MIDI file.
Right.
Yeah, it actually sounds orchestrated and it fits. I don't know why this type of sound always goes well with desert movies, but it does, and it works. I really have nothing negative to say about this adaptation. I'm trying to dig here, but it's just one of those things that to me is just like, it feels like Forever Night, like something that I watched so much when I was younger, and it meant so much to me.
It was so formative.
And it was so formative that it's hard for me to view it critically. If I have a complaint at all, we already mentioned it, it's the CG. And
Raban gets a lot more lines.
yeah, Raban does. Raban gets to be a character.
And I wasn't that impressed with Raban.
He's all right.
Yeah, he did all right.
Yeah, he's just supposed to be a brute. He does. He's a pretty good brute. I don't know why we make the Baron Harkonnen rhyme sometimes, but it's cool. I'm good with that too. I really, if I have a complaint at all, maybe it's sometimes we push the costume envelope just a little far. There's one where Fade has this triangle that's like 6 inches behind his head.
Right?
It's like,
I don't know what's up with that.
It's like mounted on a, I don't know. It's, you know what? It's all right.
He forgot to take the hanger out of his jacket when he put it on.
And no one's had the heart to tell him because he's Fade.
I feel like the rhyming thing with the Baron is because he is so theatrical in how he manipulates his underlings.
Yeah.
The rhyming occasionally is just to emphasize how overtly theatrical he's trying to be.
I feel like every change that they made was well thought through.
Between this one and 1984?
When they adapted the novel. Anything they changed from the novel, like expanding Irulan's part, totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Giving the Baron Harkonnen more theatrical dialogue totally makes sense.
Making Paul less mature,
totally makes sense. It also gives us a lot of space to grow without having to give us his internal monologue.
Right, because most of the character development we get for Paul in the book is just his kind of scope of awareness of the consequences of his actions and his escalating efforts to mitigate that.
Which relies on us hearing his internal monologue, and we're not going to get that. We don't get whispery internal voices in this adaptation, so we have to externalize all of that development. And so we have to give a place to grow, and they did exactly what they needed to do in order to give us young Paul and older Paul all in 3 episodes.
Right. And then kind of out of scope for just this episode, but I really like the continuity of the character growth between the Dune miniseries and the Children of Dune miniseries.
Yeah, and we will definitely discuss that.
You get slightly older Paul, and he looks like it. Like he has
Alec aged Newman up, and it's only 3 years later. There's only a 3-year gap between when they produced this one.
Production.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's not that. He's only 29 versus 26.
Right.
And even Raban's expanded role makes sense because I've always felt in the book, Raban disappears.
Right. Raban ran the planet.
Right. Raban runs the planet.
Before the Atreides came.
We never see anything from his point of view. He gets very little dialogue. He just shows up maybe 2 or 3 times. And then as soon as they send him to Dune to be the scapegoat for the overall policy, we don't see him again. We don't even really know when he dies. We just get a line that's like, we think Raban maybe died in that one city.
Yeah, I think it was like a dozen lines is what Raban had in the book.
Right. And so expanding his role makes sense because he has a huge role in what happens on the planet.
He has a lot of responsibility, personal responsibility for the environment that the Atreides come into.
Right.
And then the environment of Arrakis while the entire time that Paul is with the Fremen.
Yeah. And he's literally the one that Paul Muad'Dib is fighting. Like, they are the ones that are going head to head, and yet we don't get anything from his point of view. And how much of a masterclass was the scene where Raban and the Baron Harkonnen were having a conversation, and the Baron was yelling at Raban about trying to kill Paul while Fade is acting out their conversation, beating that guy in the ring.
Yes.
He's like, yeah, we had them lulled into a false sense of security. That's when they were
Yes.
most vulnerable. And then the slave trips
Right, yeah. The
Fade.
Baron is trying to like explain to Raban that we were trying to lull them into a false sense of security. That was my whole plan that I just explained to you.
Moron.
And meanwhile, Fade takes a hit and pretends to stumble
Yeah. No,
in the
the
fight.
slave trips him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fade takes a hit
Yeah.
and like gets knocked down, and
Yeah.
like he's feigning that he's like, limping or whatever
Yeah.
to the slave so that the slave will become complacent in the fight.
Right.
As the Baron is narrating
Yes.
the whole strategy.
Yeah.
And that was another change that I thought worked really well.
Right.
Because initially it was Piter's plan to have the failed assassination attempt on Paul to kind of help lull the Atreides into a sense of security.
Right.
Because, we caught the assassination attempt.
Yeah.
We're good. When really the trap was later.
Right.
And I think attributing that to Raban works really well to flesh out Raban's character. Oh,
Yes.
Raban actually has some initiative here.
He has agency.
What?
What wonder?
He's been running this planet for years and he has contacts on the planet. What? Like he can actually execute stuff without his uncle knowing?
Uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah. He only has one child
That he doesn't even know about.
that he doesn't even know about. Yeah. It's good. I said that before, but I really like
I
this
really liked
adaptation.
the scene, like just visually, where we start out with the Baron just monologuing, and
Yeah.
his face is in
The planet.
the planet,
Yeah.
and then we fade into the full scene with him, and then there's a whole bunch of interactions, but then at the end he's monologuing again, and there's something in the scene that's circular, and he gets like up behind it, and then
Yeah.
it transitions back into his face superimposed on the planet again,
Yeah.
and it has a really nice flow.
Yeah. I think for literally being filmed with a pack of cigarettes, a pound of cocaine, and $10,000. They had a lot of difficult choices to make for adapting the novel because they had a blueprint. They had, our 1980s Dune. And they kind of set the standard for like, okay, well, we can include the inner monologue. They can just like, you can zoom in on their faces while they're thinking. Well, did that work? It did, but kind of maybe we could try to do something
Right
a little
after
bit
the
different.
90s, it's kind of like, maybe that wouldn't come across as well.
What can we do that's different and better? And they do.
Yeah.
They absolutely rise to the
Yeah,
challenge.
I think they really stick to the spirit of the novel
Yes, I really
rather
and they
than the letter.
they this is what an adaptation should be. That's what I'm trying to say. You can't always take a book and convey a book one to one. You can't. All translation is betrayal.
If you haven't listened to our Babel episode,
All translation is betrayal, right? There's absolutely no way to translate a novel to the screen without a small amount of betrayal, without having to change something in order to convey what you're trying
because
to convey is
you
the
convey
same.
the meaningful things in
Right.
different ways on
Yeah,
text.
you're
versus
trying to convey the same feeling. You're trying to evoke the same feelings in the viewer, and you can do that very differently in text than you can on screen.
Right.
And this was challenged with adapting something that is extremely internal.
Right.
All of the characters are in their own head all the time to a very external, very visual medium. And you had to try to create something that felt one-to-one without actually being able to create it one-to-one. And I think that they did an excellent job. And I think that's the hallmark of a good adaptation. That's why the Lord of the Rings from this time period has aged so well is because they weren't trying to turn that into a script, turn the Lord of the Rings into the script, and then just make the Lord of the Rings.
Right. They weren't trying to treat the book as a screenplay.
Right. They were trying to create the version of the Lord of the Rings for TV, for movies.
Right.
And the things that they cut out, I know everybody gets all complainy about, like the scouring of the Shire at the end and all that stuff. And of course, that's a great part of the book. Does it work in a movie? No.
Right. It's like taking Tom Bombadil out.
Right. Yeah, you took Tom Bombadil out. Tom Bombadil doesn't work in a movie.
Tom
Sorry,
Bombadil
guys.
was kind of filler.
He's a bit filler. The first part of the Lord of the Rings
It's to
is
give
a bit
you
filler.
it's to give you a breather after the traumatic escape
Yeah.
from the Shire.
Before we fight the Barrow Whites.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so that you get a light beat between like escaping the living trees in the forest
Yeah.
and fighting and raiding the Barrow Whites, whatever.
Right.
And like, okay, we get to stop at where's Tom Bombadil later?
Tom Bombadil's after they run away.
Anyway,
After they run away from the Shire.
it's to break up
Yeah.
like this heavy action scene from the next heavy action scene. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I love the Lord of the Rings.
And you add some lore to the world.
Right. Well, that's what Tolkien was all about. Was
Right.
let's inject a little bit of lore into this. And I love the Lord of the Rings. Don't get me wrong. But did Tolkien excel at pacing? No, he did not. Okay, there are
it
parts.
depends on what you mean by pacing.
Okay, so there are parts of the Lord of the Rings where you are in it, you're flying through it, it's brilliant, and then all of a sudden, we're going to describe a tree for the next 3 pages.
Literally.
Hope everybody's fucking ready for that. Okay.
Were his books paced to be easily adapted to film?
No. If you gave me Return of the King, this is a spoiler. You've seen Return of the King. If you haven't, get the fuck out of here. Go watch it right now. So at the end of Return of the King, you get the "No, my friends, you bow to no man." All right. And everybody bows to the hobbits. Great. If you take me from that to let's go back to the Shire and find out that the Shire is enslaved and we now need to free them from the grips of the people that have taken them over, I'm fucking pissed.
Right, because we're in denouement.
Because I'm done. We're in our denouement. We're in our falling action. I've had my crescendo, my
Climax.
thank you. And now I'm in the wrap up.
Right. And it's in the book, it's not conveyed that intensely.
Right.
And so it still kind of fits into the just whole resolution of their story as, okay, we're returning home and, we're glossing over a lot of things that you would have to show in the movie.
Right.
And so you can avoid a lot of the conveyance of personal trauma of the hobbits. It's more of a, hey, we're the heroes returning home and we know how to fuck shit up.
Right.
And that's what we do.
That's what we're about to do.
And we save the day.
Right.
And so that's how it kind of works in the book. But if you added that into the movie, it would be a whole nother battle scene.
Right.
And you'd have to show all these people getting traumatized. And it would just ruin the flow of the
right. And
movie.
you face the same challenge with Dune, because Dune is very much not written to be adapted to film. It is not like right now where your ultimate goal as a writer is to have your book turned into a TV show or a movie. Not that everybody's ultimate goal is that, but certainly that is a goal for lots of people. Is like, oh, they've picked up the movie rights to my book. Heck yeah. Well, there's a way that a writer writes a book when they're imagining what it will play out like as a movie. And we don't really know any other way of doing it now because movies are so prevalent. Movies culturally are like, you might watch, plenty of people watch one or more movies a day. Whereas when Dune was written, you went to the theater to watch a movie. You maybe had 3 channels at home. You didn't.
Right. There wasn't a lot of video content.
You were not inundated with visual media. So he is not writing a novel with the expectation of it becoming visual media. So you're not getting that immediate cheat sheet. You're getting Dune is what you're getting. And then you have a unsuccessful, I would say. Successful in that I like the movie. Unsuccessful in that it does fuck all to do with Dune. 1980s adaptation. And then you have like, okay, what if we had more time? Right. What if we gave you 6 hours instead of an hour and almost 3 hours for the, what if we gave you twice as much time? What could you do with it?
Right.
Okay, well, I have to take the spirit of this novel and I have to distill it down into 6 hours. And I'm not going to be able to do a voiceover. And I have to convey the multifaceted, like, chess. They are playing 4-dimensional chess at all times, verbally, physically, and politically. And I have to convey that. How the fuck am I going to do that? And the way they did it was really just by expanding certain characters' roles, dialing down the maturity on other characters so we get more space for them to grow. And I really feel like they conveyed it really well. And they convey the slight element of mysticism of the Fremen with like our glowy eyes and our exotic accents, let's call them. Because the Fremen do have like a small amount of prescience. They all do. They're all connected.
Right.
Because they are all hopped up on the spice at all times. They're like interwoven with each other.
Right. And the orgy.
I'm pretty sure we get an orgy. I have vague memories.
I know we get some side boob.
Like, I remember a side boob. I was 16. I deeply remember a side boob. I remember feeling scandalized by something in this series, so there's probably an orgy. I guess we'll find out in the next episode, but we can wrap it up here because, I mean, I think this really covers it. I really feel like they grasped what they were doing with an adaptation.
Yeah, and let's see, the only thing I can think of that they left out of the first part of the book that was kind of plot relevant was like in the dinner party scene.
Yeah.
Or in some of the other scenes with Paul where it's kind of demonstrating his level of skill.
Yeah.
In certain things. Like we get a little bit of it with the voice when he's talking to
yeah, and then he goes to that council
Reverend
meeting
Mother.
with his dad. And
Right.
he comes up with a clever solution.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't get the like just witty banter skill.
Yeah.
And like emotional regulation skill, but we're deliberately dialing that down. And so they're kind of shifting that over into, okay, he's less mature when he arrives at with the Fremen. And one of the things we're going to focus on while he's with the Fremen is his like emotional regulation and like ability to be witty in a tense situation.
Yeah.
Which we left out of the dinner party scene. And I think that fits right along with the adapting it to film.
Yes.
To really highlight the character
Immaturity.
growth.
We have to start immature.
Right.
We really do.
Right, because we don't have the inner monologue.
Because we're not going to get the inner monologue. We're not going to literally see from his point of view when all of a sudden he can experience every single dust mote in the air and feel the press of time around him. We're not going to get that. So the best way to convey that is by growing him up, which means we have to start him young.
Right.
Yeah. And I think I get tired of the first part. It's not my favorite. Like the Caladan to Dune to, once we hit Fremen land, I'm all on board. I fucking love the Fremen. Maybe that's why it felt to me like we were ticking boxes to get to the good part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt a little bit, not rushed, but it felt like we were moving through the plot points because, like, okay, let's get all this stuff established so that we can really start having fun. And we do. And I think it's necessary. There's no way around it. You have to have establishing. And I think you could come into this not knowing anything about Dune and
still still enjoy the story.
And still enjoy the story without a huge exposition dump like you get in the 80s Dune, where they were really trying to be like, okay, let me tell you all about all the things.
One of the things that I did like that I noticed watching it this time was there's a trend in sci-fi media that's distinct between like the 2000s era sci-fi and like 70s sci-fi.
Yeah.
In that 70s sci-fi was very much focused on throwing a lot of numbers and like word soup for speculative technologies around. And so like in the 1980s Dune, they throw out numbers for the speed of the sandstorm and the size of the worms, like size in meters and whatever. And that really doesn't work well, like with a modern view of sci-fi, because it's all, I don't know, irrelevant or incorrect.
Or we're not impressed by this is my thingy widget, which has the chroma oil.
Right. They went really heavy into like mechanistic explanations in the 60s and 70s sci-fi. And that may have just been part of the culture at the time. But I think modern sci-fi has gotten closer to fantasy.
Yeah.
Where it's fantasy, where instead of magic, we have technology.
Right.
And the magic and technology, plot-wise, mechanically, serves the same purpose.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to go into the details of how the technology would work unless you really want to do that, because it's really just to massage your suspension of disbelief, to be like, okay, yes, they can travel through space, at faster than light speed, whatever. We don't need to explain how that works.
No, please don't.
And
I don't care.
I appreciated that we didn't have people throwing out like numbers and specs of things.
It may have just been like retrospectively looking back at those movies and realizing that dates them horrifically. Horrifically. Whereas if you leave it vague, it can feel of any time.
Yep.
That would be what I would do, is look back and say, that didn't work. But maybe if we just obfuscate a few things, we can let the viewer fill in. And if the viewer is filling in, they're always going to fill in from their time. And it makes a lot more sense that way.
Yep.
Well, I think we're going to leave it here because it's really, really late, as you could tell by the fact that I kept getting people's names wrong. And now we're going to go watch the second part.
Episode 2.
I'm excited. I haven't watched this in so long. I'm so excited to revisit it.
It has been so long since I've watched this.
Yeah. I guess until next time, friends.
Bye.
Bye.